Hi, everyone. Welcome to our webinar today on how HR leaders can transform operations and improve employee wellbeing with Microsoft 365 Copilot. My name is Claudia. I'm the Chief Experience Officer at Engage Squared. Next slide, please, Marco. Before we officially kick off today, I'd just like to acknowledge the traditional owners of the lands on which we're meeting today. For me, I'm on the lands of the Wurundjeri people of the Kulin Nation. I pay my respects to elders past, present, and emerging. Next slide, please. For those on the call who may be unfamiliar with Engage Squared, we are a Microsoft solutions partner that specializes in helping customers get the most out of their Microsoft 365 investment. So we do that by helping organizations adopt new Microsoft technologies like Copilot, and also by building solutions that help automate processes and make workplaces a little bit more accessible and efficient. Head over to the next slide, please. We're really excited to be hosting this session today and also to be focusing on a topic that's absolutely not spoken about enough. As you'll learn from our speakers, accessibility in the workplace is all about inclusion, and technologies like Microsoft Copilot can play a really critical role in helping a workplace become more accessible to those who may be neurodiverse or may have a disability. We've deliberately designed today's conversation to be for non-techies and also to be geared towards people who specialize in HR, in learning and development, and DE&I and so forth. As you'll see in today's agenda, we also have some time dedicated at the end of the webinar for questions. So while your camera and mic has been turned off, you do have the ability to pop questions in the chat. So really encourage you to do that as we go through today's session, and we'll make sure that we can answer as many questions as we can at the end of the talk. I'm really delighted to introduce you to our speakers for today as well. We have the lovely and very knowledgeable Marco Moyo from Engage Squared. I'm also really delighted to be joined by Niall Bettridge, who is General Manager at Anglicare, and Dom Pringle, who is a Copilot Specialist at Microsoft. Both Niall and Dom will be sharing their personal stories on how they're using Copilot to make work more accessible for them. But before we hear from them, I'd love to pass over to Marco, who will run you through Copilot's accessibility features and how AI can help HR professionals build a more inclusive workplace. So Marco, over to you.
Thank you very much, Claudia. Well, hi everyone, and a pretty big welcome to today's session, or as we would say in New Zealand, kia koutou katoa. My name is Marco, as Claudia mentioned before. I am a certified project manager here at Engage Squared. I'm also what they would call a AI champion, which really just means that I'm a huge geek who really gets excited about AI and productivity tools. So I'm really in my element here today. So what we're here to talk about today is something that's genuinely changing the way that we work, and more importantly, the way that we support our people. So that something is Copilot for M365. So Copilot introduces a really new way of working, and it's not just a fancy tool, it's a shift in how people approach everyday tasks. It takes away that grind of repetitive and admin and helps us really focus on what matters and unlock that creativity in ways that, some of us didn't even think were possible. So it's really designed to be your everyday AI companion. It's always there. It's ready to help you write, to help you summarize, to plan, to brainstorm, and really just to take the general pressure off. And it does that while being really relevant, with real-time intelligence, meaning that it adapts to your context, supports your workflows, and enhances not just your productivity, but your creativity and your confidence as well, which is really quite key. So today we're going to explore how Copilot can help make our work a little bit more inclusive, especially for those people who might experience barriers due to accessibility issues, neurodivergence, or just a general overwhelming of that modern work life. And then we'll look at specifically how Copilot can help in this HR space and provide ways in which we can truly support everyone. So Now, I know that AI can feel a bit like a buzzword right now. It's a little bit mysterious at times, can even feel a little bit intimidating. But what we're really talking about is an everyday assistant that's built right into the tools that we use: Word, Excel, Outlook, Teams. And it's really just designed to help with the things that often slow us down. So things like writing, summarizing, analyzing, and planning our days. Those were really repetitive things that eat up a lot of our time and our energy. And what makes Copilot particularly exciting, especially in HR and accessibility contexts, is that it's not just powerful, it's also personal. It works with your files, it works with your meetings, your documents, the people that you work with within your organization, everybody else around you, to really help you enclose all of that and pull it together, really grounded in that day-to-day world that we all work in. But here's the part that I really want to emphasize. You don't have to be techie to use it. It's not something that is built for techie people. Copilot is built for real people. So you don't need to know a bunch of code. You don't need to take a whole course. You don't even need to change how you work because Copilot fits right into your existing workflow. Whether you're writing a document or responding to those emails or prepping for a presentation or just trying to catch up on a really busy Teams chat or email chat, Copilot is really right there to help you. And it's not just about writing either. So you can use it to ask questions, you can summarize and understand complex information and content, and it can even create something new or analyze some data for you. Copilot respects all of those permissions that you already have. So nobody's going to suddenly start getting access to your pay information because they have Copilot. And the best part, you can do all of this using just plain language. You don't need to learn some special commands or special algorithms and things to use. You just talk to it like you would a colleague. Something as simple as, hey, what are the main key takeaways from this document? Or summarize this chat into some key points to help me prep for a meeting. It's designed to be really intuitive, really helpful, and accessible for everyone. So now that we've covered how Copilot works and what it is, let's zoom a little bit into why this really matters, especially when we're talking about accessibility and inclusion in the workplace. I want to share a couple of numbers here that tell a really powerful story. And honestly, these numbers are not known by enough people. First of all, according to the Microsoft Accessibility at Work report of 2023, 1 in 3 employees has an accessibility difference. That includes both visible and non-visible differences, like cognitive differences, sensory impairments, mental health, neurodivergence, anything like fine motor skills, all of that. This isn't a niche group. People sometimes think of this as a really small group of people. This is not a niche group. This is a huge part of our workforce. But here's the challenge. 76% of those employees with those accessibility differences don't actually disclose them at work. And that's because of stigma, maybe a little bit of lack of visible support, and people worry about being judged or overlooked or misunderstood. And when we don't see something, we often don't design for it. On the flip side, 69% of employees say that inclusive technology would really help them feel more supported. So the need is definitely there, and the desire for these tools to make them work for accessibility is quite strong. And yet, only 16% of organizations say that they're including accessibility in their hiring or talenting strategies. That is a massive gap. And it's also a massive opportunity because when we build in that accessibility into the way that we work, it just doesn't just add on or accommodate, but it's also a core part of how we communicate, hire, train, and support people. We make that workplace a much better place for everyone. And that's why we're not just talking about Copilot as a time saver or a task assistant. We're talking about it as a genuine lever for inclusion. So let's explore what those barriers actually look like in a day-to-day setting and how Copilot can help us remove some of these. So when we talk about accessibility, we're not just talking about compliance or ticking boxes. We're talking about inclusion, true inclusion, and creating a workplace where everyone, regardless of how they learn or communicate or move or process information, can contribute fully and be confident. Because when these barriers exist, whether they're physical or digital or cognitive, they don't just impact that productivity, they actually impact people. And the responsibility to remove those barriers doesn't just sit with one person in a team, it's something that we all share. So, what are we aiming for? Well, we want to remove those barriers, whether that's a complex system or inaccessible content or workflows that just only suit one kind of thinker. We want to be able to remove those. We want to also empower people, not just accommodate needs reactively, but to build in these environments where people can thrive by default. We want to be able to support diverse thinking because diverse teams are stronger teams. This includes neurodivergence, it includes English as a second language speakers, and anybody who processes their world slightly differently to the greater part of the world. We want to be able to build these inclusive digital environments where tools and systems and communications all work for everyone, not just the majority. And ultimately, we want to promote equity, making sure that people have what they need to succeed, not just an equal access to the same tools. Accessibility is a foundation of inclusion. And whether we get it right or not, it doesn't just help a few people, it lifts up everybody and everybody that is included in that experience. Let's get a little bit more specific then, because when we talk about accessibility in the digital workplace, we're not just talking about abstract ideas. We are also talking about real challenges that people face every day when they're trying to do their jobs. Some of these challenges are systematic, like inaccessible content that doesn't work well with screen readers or overwhelming layouts and complex interfaces that make it hard to find what you're looking for. Others are a little bit more task-based, things like repetitive or manual work or long-form reading and writing that's mentally exhausting, especially if you process information differently. Then there's multitasking across too many applications, switching between chats and documents and calendars and files, which is tough for anyone, but particularly draining for people with neurodivergence or cognitive fatigue. And lastly, there's poor awareness of assistive tools. It's not just about having accessibility features available, it's whether people actually know that they exist and how to access them, and whether they use them in their flow of work or not. On the right side of this slide, you see some specific groups of people who are impacted by these challenges. And this is just a snapshot. It's not everyone, but we're talking about colleagues with limited dexterity, ADHD, dyslexia, deaf or hard of hearing, language barriers, and a range of cognitive or learning challenges. So it's important to remember that these aren't just edge cases. These are our teammates, these are employees, these are our managers, these are our friends. It's often something that is thought of as a challenge, a one-time thing, but this is something that happens every day, and these are barriers that people face by default. And this is where Copilot comes in, and that's what we'll start to look at next. So how do we actually support accessibility in the workplace? We want to make sure that we're having inclusive tools. We want to have accessible content and assistive technologies. So we want to make sure that the tools that we're using are inclusive by design and that they work for a variety of needs and working styles, not just the average user. And we also want to make sure that we're creating accessible content that everybody can get to. And finally, we want to make sure that we're embracing and integrating these assistive technologies that are available to us, things like screen readers and dictation tools and captioning. And these aren't just nice to haves, they're essential for enabling equal participation at work. And the good news is that we don't have to do this manually. And that's what brings us into this next slide, where we start to really talk about where Copilot comes in. So this is where Copilot really starts to shine. It's not just a productivity tool, but it's actually a genuine accessibility ally. It can do a lot more of the heavy lifting that makes a big difference for people who often face some friction when they're at work. For example, it can rewrite content to be clearer or more inclusive, which is especially useful for people that have English as a second language or anyone who really just wants to feel more confident in how they communicate. If somebody is dyslexic, Copilot can really help them simplify complex wording, suggest synonyms, and structure things in a way that's easier for them to follow. It's also really helpful for reducing screen fatigue. Things like rephrasing really dense paragraphs into small, digestible chunks that are easier to take in and easier to read. And then for people who have limited mobility or dexterity, Copilot cuts down the clicks and typing that they have to go through. You can just enter in a short prompt or even a voice input to get the result that you need without a whole need of typing out a whole bunch of manual words on a big Word document. It's also really great for people who are deaf or hard of hearing. Being able to summarize a meeting, provide a transcript, ask questions in real time about something that they may have missed in the meeting, this is all differences that make a huge impact to people that have issues with hearing or are completely deaf. And for somebody that has low vision, Copilot can generate alternative text for images or even describe what's in an image, helping make that content a little bit more accessible on screen for people that have some low vision accessibility issues. And then one of the biggest benefits, though, is how it helps reduce that cognitive load. Whether you're neurodivergent, just overwhelmed, juggling a lot, Copilot can really help you stay focused. So it can cut through all of that noise, it can pull out what matters, and really helps you get organized without having to dig through a whole bunch of emails and documents. And it's super helpful for people with learning disabilities as well. So it can give real-time suggestions, readability feedback, and even support with grammar or vocabulary, all in a simple way. So then, let's talk about what this means in practice, especially from an HR perspective. Because creating a workplace where people feel equal and included and valued isn't just about having a bunch of policies or a bunch of checklists or a bunch of buzzwords. It's about what happens in a day-to-day. It's about how we communicate, how we respond to feedback, how we design our processes to be inclusive by default, not just by exception. And this is where Copilot becomes a really powerful partner for HR. It helps simplify that work behind the scenes, but it also helps amplify the voices that might be otherwise unheard. You can use it to create these accessible documentation, whether it's onboarding guides or policies or training materials, and really ensuring that they're written in a tone and format that is easy and inclusive. It can also help you audit existing materials for accessibility, flagging language that might be a bit too complex or dense or difficult to read. And then if you're supporting employees with different needs, whether physical or cognitive or cultural, Copilot can then help you draft tailored support plans and adjust communications to meet people where they are. It can even help with things like raising awareness, drafting comms that can explain available tools and accommodations in a way that's approachable and easy to action. Whether you want to stay ahead of these trends that are constantly changing, Copilot can summarize employee feedback, highlight inclusion patterns across surveys or engagement data, and surface insights that you might have missed. And it can help you reduce bias as well in communication and really make sure that you have generally inclusive policies and even support multilingual staff by simplifying language or adjusting tone for clarity. So, yes, Copilot helps us be more productive, but what's even more exciting is how it can help HR teams become more proactive in creating a culture that actually truly works for everyone. Let me introduce you to Jordan. So Jordan is a L&D coordinator, and like many people in the workplace, he's creative, he's articulate, and he's great at thinking on his feet. But when it comes to written tasks, he often finds that it's a bit more challenging. Jordan has dyslexia, which means that things like long documents, detailed reports, or policy-heavy content can be mentally exhausting. Jordan spends a lot of time making sure that his writing is clear and well-structured and free of errors, and that extra mental load can really add up. There's often anxiety around getting the tone right or formatting things in a way that feels professional. And of course, no one wants to send out a training summary full of typos, especially when your job actually involves helping others learn. And this is where Copilot becomes a genuine game changer for Jordan. Jordan can ask Copilot to summarize long documents into bullet points, so he doesn't have to wade through walls of text. He then uses it to proofread his emails, checking for spelling and grammar, and polishing up the language so it sounds clear and confident. When he's stuck on how to get started, Copilot can help him structure his thinking, for example, kicking off a training guide or workshop summary. He knows what he wants to say, but isn't really sure how to say it. And what I really love about this example is how practical it is. Jordan doesn't need to become an AI expert. He just needs to ask Copilot things like, hey, can you help me summarize this meeting or document? Can you help check for grammar or weird phrasing? So simple prompts with real outcomes. And suddenly, that anxiety around written communication gets dialed down. And Jordan can now focus on the content, not just formatting stress. This is what inclusion looks like in action. It's supporting people with the tools that they need to thrive in their roles without putting more on their plate and giving them their confidence to succeed. Let's take a look at another example. We have Priya. So, Priya is an HR advisor who's genuinely passionate about building more inclusive and an accessible workplace. She's across everything. So, recruitment, onboarding, internal comms, policy design, and she brings equity lens to everything that she touches. But like most HR professionals, Priya is juggling multiple priorities, and it's hard to stay on top of everything that's ever changing and all of the accessibility best practices that are often changing as well. And it's even harder to apply those consistently across all of her documents and systems and processes. She wants to make sure that everybody feels supported, regardless of their ability or background or neurotype. But the reality is there's only so much time in the day, and this is where Copilot helps her turn good intentions into actual real impact. Priya will use Copilot to review policies and communications for bias or exclusionatory language. It flags terms that could be more inclusive and suggest clearer or more accessible alternatives. She can also reword internal documents into plain English, especially helpful when tailoring onboarding or comms for people with different access needs. When it comes to recruitment, Copilot helps her draft inclusive job ads, onboarding checklists, and team updates that really reflect the diversity of the workplace that she's trying to support. It's a really huge help for her turning that feedback into actual action. Priya can also ask Copilot to summarize accessibility survey data and generate clear takeaways that she can take to her leadership team to get more action across the organization. And for visual and learning accessibility, it supports her with making alt text or adding captions and formatting guidance, making sure that all of this content is inclusive by design. So again, no coding, no jargon, just real world support that helps people like Priya do their jobs better and make their workplaces more inclusive every step of the way. So as we wrap up this section, I just want to bring back to the core idea that Copilot isn't just a smart tool. It's a support system that adapts to real people in real situations. So what you've just seen here is just a few examples of how Copilot shows up for different users with different needs. There's a lot else that's out there. This is just a few of those examples. So if we look at some of these examples we have here as well, somebody with dyslexia might be able to use Copilot to summarize and simplify complex documents so they're easy to read, or get help crafting an email that's clear, confident, and well structured without having to stress about grammar or spelling. Somebody that has autism or on the autism spectrum might use Copilot to help interpret the tone of a meeting, to get the sense of how the conversation landed or how people responded emotionally, which can be pretty hard to pick up for them in a fast-paced group discussion. For somebody who speaks English as a second language, Copilot can really help with interpreting informal phrases, translating messages, or simply summarizing chat and meeting content so that they don't feel left behind or feel like they're trying to catch up and trying to understand or feel a bit overwhelmed. These are just small moments, but they have a really big impact because they reduce anxiety, they save time, and they help people feel a bit more included and a bit more confident in their work. And rather than just hearing about these scenarios from me, we wanted to give the floor to a couple of people who are actually living this every day. They're going to share their own stories about how Copilot has supported them and in their personal life and making their work more accessible, more manageable, and more empowering. So with that, I'll hand it over to Niall to take us through his story and experience. Over to you, Niall.
Thank you, Marco, and that was really interesting. And I'll be touching on one or two things that you said there. But first of all, I will just quickly introduce myself, and I will go through a day-to-day scenario at my workplace and describe how Copilot has been helping me. So for everyone here, I'm now and I work for Anglicare, which is an organization based in Sydney, focusing on the aged care sector and also focusing on services in community and mission, where we look after people who require food and financial assistance and who require social housing and who require foster care services and such. And I was born profoundly deaf, and as the slide said over here, I depend very heavily on lip reading, and I manage a team which is growing as we speak. And on a day-to-day basis, it is extremely challenging when it comes to communication, as I will describe on the next slide. So if you can go to the next slide, please. So over here, I've included a photo. And in this photo, you can see me talking to a couple of colleagues. And in the background, there's a screen. And you might just be able to work out the captions on the screen, which are being enabled by the transcription capabilities in Copilot. So what this photo attempts to describe is me lip reading a couple of colleagues in the room. And by the way, this meeting can include maybe 10 to 12 people. And so being able to follow what everyone is saying can be challenging. And the same goes for online meetings. And I do have to say that when you think about what we went through COVID and having to work from home, for me, Copilot was made a huge difference in being able to work and communicate with colleagues. But I will touch on the challenges I'm outlining on this slide over here. So yes, there will be multiple speakers in the meeting and online, making it hard to read and follow what others are saying and being able to contribute effectively to conversations in the meeting. I do highlight on some of the pros and cons of AI and Copilot, and as I say there, the captions are not entirely accurate at times, and there's a bit of guesswork going on there. But in saying that, it's made a huge difference to how I work day to day. I am in a number of meetings every day, and it is actually very tiring. Being able to keep in track of what people are saying when. And so I do depend on Copilot's abilities to summarize the outcomes of meetings, which I either haven't been able to follow properly or I've missed out on. And I also want to mention that there are others at Anglicare who are and will benefit from Copilot as we roll it out. So, for example, to the point that Marco mentioned a little earlier, there are some language barriers. We do have a large number of people whose first language is not English. And so, therefore, when it comes to taking clinical notes and be able to summarize the outcome of care, we do want to make sure that the quality of those notes is improved on by using Copilot. The other thing that I do want to touch on, which Marco mentioned earlier, was confidence. And the reason why I'm saying this is, if it wasn't for Copilot and if it wasn't for automated speech-to-text captioning, I would not be as confident in being able to follow a conversation and to provide that value back to colleagues. And I think it would have come the other way as well. I don't think they would have been as confident in me if I wasn't able to show value. And I'm hoping I'm making sense over here. So Copilot works both ways, not just for myself, but for my colleague too. So there's a lot of benefits to be gained there. So I think I've touched on all the important points over here. And with that, I can hand over to the next person.
Great. Thanks, Niall. So my name's Don Pringle. Hello, everyone. I'm a modern work leader at Microsoft in our small, medium, and enterprise division. So, and probably the important thing for this conversation is that I have ADHD. So I thought I'd start with a story around what actually spurred me to get diagnosed with ADHD, because it does very much relate to this conversation. So within Microsoft, I lead a team of people, and twice a year I have to have a performance conversation with all of my team members. And I absolutely love the conversation. I get to talk about all the achievements that they've made. We get to work through some of the challenges that they've got. We get to talk about their development plans. But what happens after that is I then have to fill in a form that has very specific questions about all of those things to feed back to the organization. Now, the way that I did that before was that during the conversation, I'd be furiously taking notes to make sure that I didn't forget anything. And then I had to do a bunch of these back to back over a series of days to make sure that I got all the feedback into the form. The only way that I could describe that was torture for me. And I went, hey, wait a minute, I think there's something a little bit wrong here, which spurred me to go and get my diagnosis. Fast forward to today, the way that I do that now is I ask permission for my team members if we can record the conversation. And because of that, I'm having all of the notes taken so I can completely be engaged in that conversation, the bit that I love. When I've finished the conversation, I then ask Copilot the questions that the form asks. I look at the results and then I tweak anything that's not quite right. But the reality is I shouldn't be putting anything in that form that I haven't discussed with the individual already. So it's a perfect use of that. So what used to take me 2 to 3 days, and as I said, I would describe as torture, I can now do in about half a day. And with a better result in the conversation for the employee and in the what I put in the form as well. So I thought I'd share a little bit around some of my habits that I've built up over the years. And so the first one that I'd talk about, one of the challenges that I have is I get action item overload, and I'm sure everybody gets this. My challenge is that I like to put myself under a huge amount of pressure by delaying doing anything until the very last minute, and I'll spend the entire week leading up to that getting very stressed out about the fact that I'm not doing it. And then I'll still not do it, and then eventually get to that. That actually, for me, led to the point of burnout. And so because I was constantly doing this and I was never, ever letting stress release. And so this piece, it's not specifically Copilot. It's Microsoft To Do is my favorite tool for this. And this doesn't just help me, this would help everyone. I always say to people, and I can guarantee most people on this call, if you're an information worker, the first thing you do at the beginning of your day is look at your emails and your Teams messages. I'm telling you right now, stop doing that. You are doing everybody else's work first. You're prioritizing all the work that people are emailing and sending Teams messages to you as the most important thing. If you start with Microsoft To Do, then you're prioritizing your own work. And for me, as somebody with ADHD, what that means is that I can actually plan out my day. And when I put it on a list, I'm actually relatively good at working my way through the list and making sure that I'm not leaving things to the last minute. So Microsoft To Do, amazing application, very simple, but very helpful. Teams meeting, and this is quite, I think, an obvious one. For myself with ADHD, I will drift off several times in a meeting. I'm not saying that the meetings are boring, necessarily some are, but I will drift off, and the ability to say, hey, what happened in the last 5 minutes? What did Marco just talk about? What did Niall just talk about in the meeting? It's super helpful when you suddenly get asked the question and you've drifted off, and the pressure that puts you under is suddenly gone because you have that information there. But more importantly, as I said before, it allows me to be completely engaged in the meeting because it means that I don't have to do things like take notes, because the minute I start multitasking and taking notes, that's when I start to drift off and focus on other things. The next piece is around long documents. I don't think many people have the patience to read through long documents these days. I find that particularly difficult. And so using document summary, or even long emails for that matter, summarizing documents and emails, it is fantastic for me for that. And if there's anything within that summary that I'm really interested in, I can go into and dig into that as part of the document and see where that's come from. So a couple more from my side I'll talk through. I've shared this prompt on the right-hand side of the slide. Now, this is something that I have scheduled in, and so you can schedule prompts within Copilot. And so every 2 weeks, this prompt runs for me, and it says, I have ADHD, and I want to understand how I can be better with my time management. Review how I've worked over the last 2 weeks and inform me how I could have better spent my time, better. At what times was I multitasking, and where did I appear to lose focus? And so you'll see some of the ingredients within that prompt around setting context, where is the information, what am I asking it to do, and so on. It is very effective. It comes up with strategies for me around how I can better focus when it's identified where I haven't. So it's not just telling me when, it's telling me how, which I found very helpful. And so the other one I would call out is that for me, focus time is very important. And so, as I said, I can be very easily distracted. And so being able to have time where I'm not getting notifications coming at me constantly, I don't have people ringing me, and so on. So I can get to that to-do list. I can focus on my actions that I need to do. And so you can ask Copilot to block out focus time in your diary. And what that will do is it just cuts out all of those distractions so that I can get that focus work done. Another feature that a lot of people don't necessarily know about, within Windows itself, there's a capability called Focus Assist. And so if you search that within your Windows search bar, you can set Focus Assist for a period of time, and that will remove all notifications that come through Windows. So very effective to get that focus time in place. And so I think probably to round out, I guess for me, when it comes to personal productivity, Copilot is really about how do you reduce the mundane administrative tasks, searching for information, note-taking, triaging emails, manual repetitive tasks. And to be frank, nobody likes doing that stuff, if you've got ADHD or not. And so for me with ADHD, it's really around minimizing the challenge that I have with some of those things. But equally with ADHD, we get some superpowers as well. We get things like the ability to hyper-focus. Creativity is a big strength. Thinking about strategy, I think, is a strength of mine. And even things like how I can take complex things and make them simple is a strength. And that's a necessity for me to survive in this world, is how I can simplify things. And if you think about what Copilot's doing, it's minimizing the mundane administrative tasks, and it's freeing me up time to enhance and enhancing my creativity to do some of those things where my superpowers are. And so I have a real belief that actually Copilot is going to help people like me actually outperform others in the workforce, which gets me super excited. So look, that's everything that I was going to share today. If anyone wants to reach out for anything at all, feel free to add me on LinkedIn. But with that, I will hand over to Claudia.
Thank you so much, Dom, and also Niall for sharing your stories. That was super insightful. So really appreciate that. I thought we would just quickly touch on how to get started with Copilot if your organization is still in the early days, or if you're struggling with your Copilot adoption strategy or implementation strategy. This is the steps that we typically take at Engage Squared. So we'll send the deck around, but definitely have a look at this. And these are some really good prompts to get you thinking about how you can start implementing Copilot within your organization. The most important thing is starting with the business case. So making sure that you really understand what is the use cases for Copilot within my organization. Every organization is unique. And the people that work within your organizations are unique. So super important to make sure that you're understanding that upfront so that your implementation is much smoother. Then more of the technical things in terms of optimizing your environment. There is a little bit of work that needs to happen behind the scenes around making sure that your information is protected and secure, and that Copilot isn't overexposing any information to people who shouldn't have access to that information in your company. Testing capabilities. So with this one here, when you're doing your pilot and roadmap, make sure you're not just looking at generic scenarios, or that you're not just including a really small sample size of your organization. Make sure that the sample size of people that you're doing a pilot with is diverse. And if you do have people that experience accessibility issues in your organization, make sure you include them so that you get that feedback and you also get those use cases that are relevant to the way that they work. Super important, especially from a HR perspective, if we're looking at employee well-being and making sure that our people feel productive and challenged at work. And then lastly, scaling out. So doing a big scale out usually includes a big change and adoption campaign. And Engage Squared, this is just a shameless plug, guys, but we specialize in this stuff, and we've done plenty of Copilot implementations. So our change team are really well versed in helping your organization really understand the value behind using AI as a productivity tool to augment the work that they're doing. With that, I might open it up to questions. Let me just quickly have a look. So there was a question from Pankaj in the chat, which Cecilia, I think you may have answered. But is there any reason Microsoft won't make M365 docs automatically accessible for every Copilot generated document? So essentially doing an accessibility check for every document that's generated in Word. I can elaborate on that, unless, Dom, you want to jump in and talk about it.
No, I'll let you guys. Just going to say it's a great idea, actually. And if it's not already built in, we should be putting a feature request in.
Yes, I agree. It is such a good thing. But the one thing I was going to say is that for those who don't know, Microsoft are huge on accessibility. So Satya Nadella, who is the CEO of Microsoft, is very open about his personal story. And his son, I believe, has a disability. So accessibility is really built into the products. And I think Cecilia shared in the chat that there's an accessibility checker that you can run in conjunction to using Copilot. I wanted to share a couple of links in the chat as well for those who aren't aware of just the existing accessibility features that are available within Microsoft Office. So you don't even have to be using Copilot to take advantage of a lot of the accessibility features that are available. So I've just popped a link in the chat for you there. And then also for the technical people on the call, or if you want to share, oh, I think I've done the links the wrong way around, but they're both there. There's a few technical checks as well that your teams can be doing to make sure that your Microsoft 365 environment has all the features that benefit your people. All right, with that, any final questions from those online? While you guys are thinking of some questions, I might ask a question to the group. Is there any advice that you would give in terms of how managers can be using Copilot to support accessibility within their teams?
I'll kick off. It's a good question. I think for me, there's a lot of training resources available on Microsoft Learn. And I think it's making sure that people are aware of those resources. And in fact, it's not just around Copilot itself. I think across all different accessibility requirements, there is really good training available through that platform. So it's making sure that your teams are aware of what's actually available, because I think often it's just that people actually don't know what's there. And that simple example I gave before around Windows Focus Assist, a lot of people wouldn't know that exists, but it can be very helpful for somebody with accessibility needs.
Nice one, thank you. Marco or Niall, did you want to add anything to that, or good?
Yeah, I'll quickly add something to that. Thank you, Claudia. Yeah, I think just in terms of thinking about Copilot usage itself and how it can really support these managers and making sure that we have a more inclusive workplace, the first thing that immediately comes to mind is just being able to look through some of the existing content you already have within the organization and leveraging Copilot to actually analyze that for accessibility and provide you with suggestions on how to make that information more accessible. The second thing is, of course, also leveraging Copilot's ability to be able to be a real research buddy to find some of this information about how to best apply some of these accessibility tools, accessibility policies, and really just making sure that we're including accessibility in the way that we think. And then finally is in helping us draft awareness and communications around accessibility needs. As I mentioned before, accessibility needs are one of those things that they're not just a one-person thing. It's everybody has to pitch in together to make sure that people feel included and feel confident in the workplace. And in order to do that, there has to be awareness raised, because there just isn't enough of it. So being able to leverage Copilot to draft some really engaging communications that can be sent out in the organization, can even help you with creating visuals using the visual creator that you can post around in your internal intranet or internal social enterprise networks, and really make sure that we're kicking in that engagement and getting people across these accessibility challenges that people face, and how we can all work together to make sure that people are being included and are feeling confident in the workplace.
I think in addition to what everyone's saying over here, I was also thinking about the onboarding process for newcomers into my organization. So as and where required, we should first of all increase the awareness on how Copilot would assist people with specific needs, and as part of that, help the HR team be aware of the features and capabilities we're talking about here.
Love that. Thank you. I do have another question, and Niall, it's actually maybe one you could shed some light on too. I think a lot of organizations with a workforce that are heavily English as a second language, the barrier to adoption of new technology can be quite high. Even just using Microsoft Teams can feel really overwhelming. Can you share any insight in terms of how you are helping to implement Copilot to make their lives easier without them feeling overwhelmed from a new technology?
I'm happy to help respond to that question, but I will do so from a slightly different angle. So yes, we have a large number of our workforce who don't have English as their first language. And the angle I'm taking here, as well as Copilot assisting them in their day-to-day work, we do have that risk and compliance angle too. So from a risk point of view, we need to make sure that what we capture down in English is of high quality, and that from a risk and compliance point of view, we're not falling into the cracks. So I know I'm not talking about inclusion and accessibility over here, but that element that help those people and the organization as a whole with risk and compliance guidelines. Hope it makes sense over here.
Yeah, absolutely. And that you touch on a really important point, especially for organizations that are doing clinical care. There's a lot of reliance on policy documents, right? And reading work instructions, etc. And if you're putting an AI overlay on top of that, you want to make sure that it is not providing incorrect information. Especially, or to anyone, regardless of if you have an accessibility need or not. So that's a very valid and important point.
And also, in addition to that, we have an awful lot of policies and procedures which even English readers can't read properly. And so Copilot will have to simplify what's being said there.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think the key takeaway I have from that is, really pushing the what's in it for me message for someone who perhaps is English as a second language or, whatever they might be struggling with in terms of accessibility needs, being able to say this is going to simplify the way you work so that they don't feel overwhelmed to give AI a try, I think is a great way to approach it in your organization. Marco or Dom, did you guys want to jump in?
Yeah, I just want to talk about some really cool tech I saw a couple of months ago, actually. It's a company called EST Soft, and they've built a translation service on the Microsoft platform where you can upload a video in any language, and it will translate it to another language, but it will appear as if the person's actually talking in that language as well. So EST Soft, it's built on the Microsoft platform, and just an incredible example of the type of technology that's coming out now to help those with English as a second language. We particularly experienced this within Microsoft. We're part of the Asia organization. And so a lot of my colleagues overseas were using some of these types of technologies to help communicate with them in their language to reduce that the language barrier.
That's really cool. And is that feature rolling out to Teams?
That is an external software vendor that's built that on the Microsoft platform. But there is language translation in Teams as well, of course, that our teams are using internally.
Yeah, nice. Thanks for the link, Martin, in the chat. Very good.
And just to quickly add to all of that, those are all really great use cases. But the other thing I really want to highlight is specifically when we're talking about people that have English as a second language, is the real basics. People coming into the workplace, and there's a lot of acronyms, there's a lot of corporate language, there's a lot of documents that are really complex and hard to understand. People with English as a second language using Copilot can actually use Copilot to really just simplify all of that English and text without necessarily even translating it, just being able to simplify it and understand what the context is that people are talking about. This can be even more powerful in meetings where there's group conversations happening and there's a lot of words being thrown around that maybe the context isn't being quite picked up by somebody that has English as a second language. They're able to use Copilot on the side during the meeting to ask Copilot to simplify those things for them so they can grasp what is being talked about. And again, adds to that element of confidence in the workplace to be able to then speak up and contribute to the conversation, knowing that they're understanding what is being talked about. So as well as some of these other really cool things that are going on, we mustn't forget that there's these really basics that are small, but again, have a compounding effect on helping people that have English as a second language.
Yeah, I love that. Thank you for sharing, Marco. There's a question from Steph in the chat. What are your top tips from a change management perspective? I can start on that one. So I used to work in change management at Engage Squared. So I think really it's about just going to town on your change management approach. I think, communication is key. What I was saying before when we were sharing that kind of stepped process of, designing your business case, testing and pilot, etc., that has change management effectively inbuilt into that process. What's really key here, and we touched on this before when Niall and I were discussing, implementing it to people where there's a high technical barrier, really talking about that what's in it for me message. So having your day in the life of examples are really, really powerful and an effective way to help people resonate with, well, what does this technology mean to me? I'm sure all of you have lots of different technologies that you're using in the organization. So this can feel like just another thing and quite noisy. But I'm also sure that all of you have used AI in your personal lives as well, and your employees have too. So they should have at least some kind of experience understanding what AI can do. So really making sure that you focus on that what's in it for me message, communicate often and early, and then deliver training in an accessible way would be my top tips from a change management perspective. Of course, having your champion network as well is really important when you're implementing something like Copilot, making sure that you have champions from different departments in your organization so that they're always uncovering new use cases that might be relevant for your organization. Marco.
Just adding on to what Claudia has just mentioned there, which is all really great because, again, being able to show people how AI impacts them instead of just going, hey, this is a new thing that we're doing now, just go and do it, is really, really quite powerful. But the other thing that I really wanted to add there is that when we're talking about change, the other thing is making sure that we celebrate the wins. You want to be able to have some sort of enterprise social network, or even just simple as a Teams channel where you can celebrate some of these successes that you're seeing with Copilot and share them with the rest of the organization. What this does is it inspires people to actually have the curiosity to try and use Copilot for themselves and see what other value they can get when they're seeing all these other people using it for great use cases and getting great value out of it. And then the other thing to add on to that is having your leadership team buy-in. Nothing says this is a great tool like having your leaders using it and talking about it and saying this is actually working for me. I'm not just telling you to go and do it because I'm at the top and telling you to do it. So being able to share all of those experiences with the organization can really help people adapt this tool and use it on a day-to-day basis.
Love that. Very cool. We are pretty much at time. One thing I love doing is giving people time back. And also respecting time, so we won't go over, but just really quickly, last slide, please do get in touch if you do want to explore how you can use Copilot in your organization. Check out our Copilot page on our website as well, engagesquared.com/Copilot. But thank you so much everybody for joining the session today. It's been fantastic having this discussion, and also Niall and Dom hearing your stories. Really appreciate you sharing that. Everybody have a lovely day. And with that, I'll gift you 2 minutes back of your time. Bye, everyone.